You were listening to the Living Room Disciple podcast. We aim to model the discipleship conversations that should be happening on couches and around dining room tables. We're trying to grow our imaginations to think about what could and should be as we follow Jesus. We're asking ourselves questions about how we're being formed more or less like Jesus by the world around us. And we invite you into that conversation. So if you find this episode helpful, make sure to share it with a friend. Also, liking and subscribing, leaving a review, all those things help us grow and get the word out there. So please be sure to do that as well.
In the world today, technology is changing rapidly, and one of the major unknowns that seem to be growing by leaps and bounds is AI. So I've had a number of conversations on this topic with a believer whose work I respect on the subject of really all things technology and communication. So today I've invited Dr. Michael Finch to speak with us on the question of how does technology form us? So to start, Michael, welcome. So glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be with you. It's fun.
It's such a joy to continue our great conversations and for the benefit of our listeners. And to start out, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and the things that you do and where you are now, because I know that you've recently changed locations.
Yes. So right now I'm actually living in a place called Ottawa, Tennessee, which is the home of Southern Adventist University. And I just recently was able to get a job here, and I'm really excited about it. This is a really well-run school that's growing, and just a great environment to be in. But yeah, I'm a communication professor. So I teach a lot of different areas of communication, from journalism, which I was a journalist for a couple of years back in the early 2000s, through to advertising and social media, and a bunch of other classes in between. My favorite stuff is actually more research oriented, but in higher ed, a lot of Christian opportunities are mostly in teaching positions, and so I just get to teach all of this fun stuff. Now it changes all the time, and so when ChatGPT happened, it's sort of AI had existed before that, but ChatGPT definitely sort of changed the landscape in that we had a new AI that was exceptionally useful, whereas some of the previous AIs that were out there, well, they may have had particular purposes, but their utility in terms of the general population might have been limited. So that's something that I'm researching now, and working on a book called From Fiction to Fact, AI as Communication is the working title. And yeah, things are moving forward on that. So that's been a lot of fun.
I can't wait to read it. I hope that you will send us a copy and that we can have a conversation again after that. I can only imagine not only how much there is to research, but how it's changed the landscape in the classroom. And it is mind-boggling to consider how the resources of ChatGPT in particular have changed the experience of teachers regarding their students' work. And that's another full thing that could be dived into thoroughly about how it forms us as students to have those types of resources at our fingertips. And what does it look like to navigate the world of integrity as disciples of Jesus in this area? But today, I really want to focus more on, I guess, a broader picture of how technology changes and how that just huge, rapid change can often form us as disciples if we're particularly not thinking about it carefully, how we can just absorb the waters that we're swimming in. So I want to start by asking the question, how does technology change culture in a more general way?
Yeah, and that's a great question that people often don't think about. But technology, and especially communication technology, is always acting on us. There is a guy named Marshall McLuhan, who he came up with this idea. Basically, well, he sort of got the idea, but then applied it specifically to communication technology of technological determinism is
Ah,
the fancy term. And this concept is that when especially the communication technology changes, everything changes with it. From the way we govern to the way we relate to even the way I would argue that we relate with God, that actually
mm.
changes as the communication technology changes.
Wow. So technological determinism, shaping the way that we interact with one another. That's very helpful for us to just pause and think about that for a bit. So, can you go a little deeper with this idea and give me some examples?
Absolutely. So there, McLuhan had four epochs. So he said that epochs, as in time periods.
Okay.
So he said that we had the oral, and of course he's an evolution. He's thinking in secular, the secular thought process. So he's thinking that
Hmm.
we evolved into orality. So orality is just spoken language before the written language existed. And then we had the written language. And then in the 1500s, the Gutenberg invented the printing press, and we had the print generation. And then he says the next step was the electronic generation. And then he died during the electronic generation. But he
Hmm.
did postulate a bit about what might be coming. And since then, media ecology is an entire field of research that has sort of revolved around that. But some examples. So, one interesting thing, I do a lot of my research in Eastern Europe,
Mm.
and so even right back here, you can see a little thing that I got from an Orthodox church. But
Oh,
have you ever
cool.
been into an Orthodox church?
I've never been into an Orthodox church before, so tell me more about this experience.
Okay, so in an Orthodox church, I think they're really, really interesting and unique in that when you walk in, you're surrounded by pictures.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
we, in modern evangelical traditions, would possibly look down at this because
Mm.
they actually call them icons, and
Sure.
then they worship God through venerating, so through looking at pictures.
Hmm.
But when you think about it, these came about during the written epic, and so during that era, the leaders had text, but the average people didn't. They were illiterate, and so the way that we experienced God during that era was you had priests in
Sure.
Catholicism and in Orthodoxy, and these priests were the arbiter of the word. And so the two ways that Orthodox Christians were able to worship was kind of through the guidance of the priest. And so the priest would do sacraments and other things,
Mm.
and through looking at pictures. But if you're
Sure.
an illiterate generation, that makes a lot of sense. That is a way that you would be able to experience God, and you'd be
Right.
limited in experiencing God in a lot of other ways because you can't read. And they had chanting and a few other things, and so it was a very experiential thing
Mm.
for the people who were more, I guess, oral would be, and the people who had print had power. And
Right.
so that era was the era that we had the lords and kings, and then the vassals and serfs. And
Mm.
so our
Mm.
entire culture in Western culture was determined by the technology.
Right.
Um, and so I
Right.
could go a little further. So then let's go to the Reformation.
Sure.
The printing press happens, and it democratizes media. So no
Sure.
longer do the lords and the kings and the priests have control over information.
Mm.
They now, so all of a sudden, that information is everywhere and everyone has access to it. And what happened culturally? So
Yeah.
culturally, we get the 95 thesis,
Right. The
and all,
Reformation.
yeah,
Yeah.
everything changes, and we get democracies. So
Mm.
democracies start to
Mm.
emerge, and this idea that, and we get an individual relationship with God to a greater
Mm.
degree as well. Like, because people can learn individually with the written word, they can just learn
Mm.
themselves. People started to have a personal relationship with God and an individualistic relationship with God as well. And the church has changed. So when I'm teaching in a class, I wish I had a whiteboard behind me I could show you. But have you ever been to like a Methodist or Presbyterian or just a Reformation church?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so a lot of us have experienced that. And one of the iconic things that I like to think about is that they have the pews. And if you think about it, so technology shaping culture, the pews, if you were to sort of just picture that from above,
Right.
look like a book.
They do. That makes total sense. I can fully imagine.
Yeah.
Yes.
So even the shape of the worship space reflects the media technology, and then the way that we worship begins to change as well, where things are largely cognitive, and people are learning from the teacher pastor themselves, and it democratized our faith. It let us have a personal relationship with
Sure.
Christ to a much greater degree. So
It's so interesting to think about. And I'm gonna have you pause,
please.
because otherwise I'm gonna be like, my brain is gonna explode if not. But I think about some of what you're talking about regarding the icons and even the illuminated texts that were made as a part of conveying the gospel to, for example, the Irish. That is something I
Mm,
experienced. I had a chance to go to Trinity College Dublin when I was young and see how the illustrations and the illuminated texts served in the way that you've described that
hmm,
iconoclasm did. I guess
yeah.
that's how you say it. We're going to be all full of needing to pronounce things carefully for one another or differently so that our listeners can come with us, because I would have thought of epic, as you say, as epoch. So
Epoch. Okay.
I don't know
I'm
which way
probably
to do it,
mispronouncing.
but I think we should do both, because it's
Yeah.
probably all of the above, depending
Hmm.
on where you're from. So these different epochs and
Hmm.
how the gospel was experienced, how God was experienced in these different technological epochs or epics
Hmm.
as regards to communication and what the communication technology was like. And as an educator, and I know that you're an educator as well, we think of these trends in education that had to do with as well the orality or the
Hmm.
written word, or now what is becoming more and more exciting as a trend to return to the dialectic and the experiential.
Yeah.
And that also changes the format of a classroom to look more like a circle, which sounds like democracy to me as well. So
Mm,
interesting how our learning, our communication technology, all of that forms culture in some very clear ways as we reflect on that. So I don't know if we're quite ready for this. You talked about how we experience God. We talked about the democratization of really information
hmm.
and of our faith, that we were able to take more ownership even of our faith through the way that information has come out. But in today's world, as I think of maybe a visual, one of the strongest visuals that comes to mind is from Wall-E, where they're all
Mm,
kind of floating around with screens in front of their faces.
yeah.
Uh, Is that a good visual to try to lean into as we're thinking about what technological change means for today's world, or what do you think it means for today's world?
Yeah. And it's a great evolving question. So we are
Mm,
in the middle of, I would say that AI is the next printing press. Like, so this is an extremely, extremely major shift. But previous to that, we had the digital revolution.
okay.
So I guess I'll go through the electronic epoch really quickly to get to where we are now. So the megachurch, I would say, was the culmination of the electronic epoch.
Got it.
So the electronic epoch, largely the media technology of that age was the TV and the
Okay.
movie and things like that.
Sure.
And if you think about it, when you go to a megachurch, they are they're like a movie theater, and they have
Hmm.
a show that's highly produced, and then people individually interact with parasocial is what I would call that, relationships. So relationships with people
Okay.
that they don't really know personally. They might know them a little, but they don't know them well. But so this sounds like I'm critiquing this, and I'm not. Like, to me, it's just a different method. It's actually the kind of church I'm going to right now. I've gone to several different types, but the one that I go to right now is more like that. And it's a really powerful tool that was formed in that electronic age where entertainment and the theater experience, honestly, is a way that we can learn and grow, and then that passionate singing and emotive singing can be something that can really draw us in and open up that space for the Holy Spirit to do work in a new way. So I think that it's really amazing that God's been able to use these different methods, and some of them still are here. So now we come to the theorists haven't come up with anything past electronic, really, but I have said that the digital era would be the internet through social media, and now we're entering a new one. But in that, the internet through social media era, and our little black boxes that we're staring at all the time, that is changing things, like, again, in massive way, like incredible ways. And one of the biggest things is that actually I would say that the church has not reacted to this, and I don't know if it's not an easy reaction, and it's taking people away from the faith a lot, sadly, even though these tools allow us to communicate so much more effectively over distance and like we are right now. It's also becoming something that is counterfeit for getting answers to life's mysteries. And so, and it just distracts people a lot too. And so those two elements have really, I think, detracted. So the Wall-E screens, yes, that's a really great image for, this generation. I remember taking students on a mission trip, or on an international trip, and we're in Australia. And in this beautiful scene where everything around us is lush, and it was sort of a jungle scene where we were inland a little bit, but they had internet, and so
I see.
there was a hotspot there somewhere, and so you've got like a mountain here, and these beautiful trees and vines all around us, and my students are in a circle facing inward, staring at their phones.
Oh my. Okay.
Because they hadn't had internet in a little while. And I'm just like, wow, this generation, there's, they experience the world through these phones. And this portal becomes a part of their own identity and their own self-concept. And so that's a massive shift. And honestly, it's hard. We don't know exactly how to deal with this, like, as Christians, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the digital age, which you're calling internet through social media, am I getting that right? And then
Yes.
what are you calling the thing that comes after that, internet through social media? Because I know that you've done some work projecting where AI and other technological changes are propelling us.
Yeah. And there's a lot of theory that revolves around this. So there's a lot of theory that revolves around what I would call digital era as well. It's just it hasn't crystallized, and nobody's given it like the name.
Got
that
it.
epoch.
Yes, there you go.
Epic.
Epic epoch.
Yeah.
You say potato, I say potato.
So there were a couple of theorists. There's Catherine Hales, who talks about the post-human era. Others that talk about transhuman, and still others who talk about cyborg theory. And these kinds of ideas have actually been like this era has been thought about for a long time. It's just technology hadn't caught up to theory. But many of the different, basically, there's a book that I recently read that I like. It's a little optimistic. It's not deist, but it's called co-intelligence.
Okay.
And it's an optimistic view of where things can go in a transhuman world, because we have this new era we have co-intelligence now. We are not sort of alone, as weird as that is.
Right.
And we have these augmenting machines that are extremely powerful, and that hopefully can help us and be something that actually can potentially lead to greater productivity and growth and that kind of thing. So
Right.
so that's where things are going. But I mean, really, ultimately, where things are going is embodiment of AI.
Okay.
So the next step is we're going to have relatively sentient robots that
Okay.
that will exist with us in what up until now has been science fiction levels. Like, that's really coming. That's not a theory. Elon Musk has done presentations of his Generation 3 robots. They look insane. Like, I don't know how people will react to this kind of technology. Like, will they actually spend $20,000 on a personal robot? It's hard to say. But it's the technology is actually happening to where this isn't just a sort of communication realm of interaction for average people.
Okay, so quick story. Me and my wife have 4 kids, and as you can imagine, it's kind of difficult for us to find time to read the Word together. And so I was pretty interested when a little over a year ago, a mentor of mine told me about the Dwell Bible app, an app that really contains some of the most beautiful audio Bibles you'll ever hear. So we checked it out and started a new habit, listening to the Psalms at night before going to bed. But the best part is we set it up so it would read the same psalm over and over to us, but in a different translation and in a different voice. Voices that were diverse, and reminds me of the crazy diversity and multiculturalism that is the church. That the Bible and the story of Scripture goes far beyond my cultural bounds. And it's not just the Bible. There's also daily readings where you can, on your drive to work, listen to the Dwell Daily and get into the Word every single day. All right, so for more information and to get a special discount code for being a Living Room Disciple podcast listener, head on over to dwellbible.com/TLRD. That's dwellbible.com/TLRD. You can find out more information about the Dwell Bible app, and you can get plugged in with a special discount code so you and your family can get started on listening to the Bible and all these different wonderful voices and get more connected and soaked in the Word. Okay, back to the episode.
All right. So from fiction to fact, indeed.
Yes.
You're making me think of a recent college visit I had with my middle daughter. She's starting to look into colleges in our area, and we went over to East Carolina University. And one of the things that boggled my mind is that this campus utilizes robots to use their Grubhub service on campus. It's mediated by robots. So here we are, all these things that we dreamed of as kids and knew in our minds that this is just play. It is no longer play. It is reality. So you talked about how, and I appreciate what I would call your Christian optimism, that there is not just this optimism that if philosophically, when it is a human-based or technology-based optimism instead of a godly optimism, that it can send us into places where I would just say it's not healthy to our discipleship. But your version sounds like a healthy version of optimism, a biblical version where you recognize, as Kuyper has talked about, that Christ is the Lord over all of culture and is in culture, continuing to bring it to a place that is glorifying to Him. So what you've said about the digital age and how our churches may have been shaped by it, but not in a way that was purely detrimental to our faith. So I appreciate that Christian optimism regarding technology. And I'd like to ask, what are some ways that you see the new transhuman age of technology affecting culture and Christian culture in particular? And of course, I want your optimism at the same time as maybe your warning. Like,
Mm,
what would be some warnings that we need to keep in mind as we think about this transhuman age?
yeah. Well, the warnings, I mean, being a believer, we believe that there's an end to this story,
Mm,
and we don't know when. So I actually am. I mean, I'm an Adventist, so that idea that the end is coming. One of the things that I've just never. I mean, I've been a part of a few different churches over the years, but one of the things that I've never been personally exceptionally comfortable with was like the
mm,
desire for the end to happen now, and that's actually really present
mm,
in a lot of different traditions.
sure.
For me, I'm like, God, just wait a little longer, get a few
Yeah.
more. It's like just share your love with a few more people. And
Mm, mm,
however, the evil in this world is so strong, that He's led it. It's obviously His divine providence and all of that. But that the end will come. Eventually the story will come to an end. But my prayer is always for a Nineveh. I'm just like, God, just give,
mm.
you know just let a few more in, and just give grace, God. Let
Yeah.
this thing, you've created a really amazing thing here, and bring more people in. So
Mm, mm,
but with that said, the technology that exists now allows for amazing deception, and so
mhm,
that's a huge area that the end times calls for. The end times calls for deception. The end times also calls for incredible levels of control.
mm,
And actually, right now, there's one of the reasons that they sort of made the really high quality AI public
mm,
was China was also developing AI, and they have a highly controlled world where their AI is partially being used to create an absolutely controlled society where they have social scoring and absolute awareness of like every single person as a numeric code in a massive machine with all of these different people. So the potential is there for really, really horrible abuse when you have computers that are this powerful. And some of the people who are behind the AI that we have in the Western world, they said we need our AI to be the most powerful
mm.
because we
Yeah.
want AI, we want to have free society, and we want to have this AI serve people. So that's kind of the warning, is that we have this immense and amazing technology that could be used to absolutely deceive. I mean, right now, I could take the video that you have there and feed it into a few different programs and make you say anything I want.
Mm,
It'd
mm.
cost a little bit of money these days. Like the really good ones are expensive, but you could do that to me. So this world is really dangerous, and so that's something that we need to be careful of, is that we just have to really trust the things that we know, trust our word, the word rather, trust
Mm,
the people we know, trust the networks that we know, because so I think there will be a little bit of a lensing effect where
mm,
people see, I can't trust the things outside of my local network as much, which actually that oddly happened with this last digital epic, we'll say. The during that digital era, the people became more tribal, which some had some positive effects and some negative effects, actually,
mm,
sometimes
mm,
leaning towards the negative. So I think that lensing effect will happen even more. That's the negative, but the positive is these tools are really incredible, and they can help us learn and grow more quickly. They can
mm,
help us become more productive. They can literally teach us. And so, like in writing my book right now, I'm actually, because it's a book about AI, at the end of each chapter, I'm going to describe how I use AI in that chapter. And I was writing chapter one, really having so much fun with it, and using AI to do research, but then writing my own narratives and integrating all of this. And I had written my chapter sections, and I thought about them, and I tried a bunch of different methods. Like I borrowed from calm theory, and I borrowed from other things, and I just was trying to look at, the chapter 1 is AI in fiction. And so I'm going back through and looking at everything from golems in Jewish traditions to Greek myths. To my first one is always Aladdin and the lamp. And so the lamp to me was like one of those really early ideas of AI. But I'm going through. I created these different section headings, and I asked ChatGPT, what would you do? And gave it mine and gave it a bunch of other information. And it's better. The ones it created were better, because it's drawing from all of human knowledge to give me those.
Wow.
And I had a nice conversation with GPT 4.0, and like asked it why it chose this and why it chose that, and we went back and forth. And I learned a great deal from it to develop this book. So I'll talk about that in the book, because
Sure.
But that kind of reality to have a semi-sentient entity that's programmed, Lord willing it stays this way, to help us. Like that's what AI wants to do. If you have a conversation with GPT or Copilot or any of them, they always will default to like, I just want to help you. So to have that kind of an opportunity to have these great assistants or helpers, it just can help us at this point. So hopefully these, the negatives won't sort of crest and overwhelm the positives.
So as I'm synthesizing what I'm hearing from you, it's all about how we use technology. Of course, it is that expression, as in the very beginning of the word, of human dominion over. And how are we expressing our dominion? It's interesting. Almost every conversation that I have witnessed so far in the Living Room Disciple touches on something of what our human role is, of course, in the mandate that was given to us to go and to engage this world, to make culture, to make disciples, and often touches on eschatology. What do we think about end times? And I appreciated your thoughts on this come Lord and yet also tarry a while, and the humility that comes from knowing that the Lord is the Lord over us. And then what do we do to exercise our stewardship, our dominion inside of the fact that we are under authority, and using it to glorify our authority and the one who's in authority over us is what I'm trying to say, instead of to glorify ourselves and make us the ones who are authority, who are controlling, as in the situation you said in China. How are we exercising dominion has so much to do with this specific topic of technological change and its influence on culture. How do we partner with it that it might have its best influence on us and our best influence on it? That's what I'm hearing as the questions that we can ask ourselves as we engage. So really thankful for your thoughts on that. And I want to give you some opportunity to wrap up any further thoughts or point towards more of what you have that's unfolding in what's going to be a rich resource in your book before we close for today.
Yeah, well, and I love where you went with that. I actually am working on I'm teaching a class on social media this semester. And the one of the things that I'm trying to do is, have biblical integration. And I was going through, and social media in that era, I would say it's a highly narcissistic system where the system of rewards and benefits go to those who focus on themselves the most. And so I was thinking, I'm teaching this class, I'm teaching something, and a lot of the people in the world who are using it are using it, to be narcissistic and to have sort of greater control in lots of ways. And so I thought about a bunch of different verses and things when I started thinking this through. One of them was Esther, and Esther's time. She was in a highly narcissistic place. She was put up on a pedestal. She, it was all about her, and she had people who bathed her in perfume and, made her as beautiful as possible. And it's all about her. Right. And there was that moment where, her, is it Mordecai? Oh, I hope
It is. Yeah.
it
Her
is. Okay.
uncle. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Mordecai comes up to her and, says, for such a time as this, how do you know God will raise someone else up if you don't do this, but for such a time as this.
Yeah.
And so when I'm teaching social media, my whole point is, you guys are amazing. And, I do want you to, you do need to grow and build your platform and promote. But, there's a reason for this. And if you're not doing this for service, if you're not doing this, if you're not remembering, like I was put here for such a time as this, then it could kind of hurt you. So I guess that's one thought. I have more verses that I could go to there, but the other thought is we want to be co-intelligence. We want to, have these devices and not let it replace our intelligence. So the Wall-E example, the people had completely abdicated their own selves. It's like, what were they in that scene at the end of the movie? They kind of were just existing with no meaning in life, with no agency, really. Everything was chosen for them and given they just were being fed. And that is a real danger right now, that we give up our own agency. So I, as a professor, promote what I would call deep learning instead of, so vertical learning instead of horizontal learning. And vertical learning is taking the time to do the hard work behind those processes. So when I'm writing this book, I'm writing. It's like I'm not just saying, ChatGPT, give me a chapter.
Sure.
And I came up with chapter headings first, and then I talked about them with ChatGPT because I want to think these things through. Like, I want to do the deep learning so that I really understand this stuff. And ChatGPT's answers might have been better, but I thought it through.
Right.
And
so I'm hearing, that you are not just relying on the technological synapses, as it were. Like you haven't outsourced those to technology.
Right.
You're still allowing your brain to do its beautiful work, but partnered with somebody, with some entity. It's not a person. It's not an embodied person.
Right.
But it is still an entity that allows you to do the deep work if you will choose to do it. And I hear that choice in you, and that's refreshing.
Yeah. And that's my encouragement to everybody, do the, learn how to be a critical thinker, learn and use these machines to help you learn. And then that will that'll make you a more effective person in all aspects of life, but a more effective user of the technology as well. So,
Yes. Well, I hear joy and curiosity. I hear humility. I hear a desire to be more like the God who has made you, but recognizing that you are an embodied person who has limits and who, again, you embrace that with humility. So I hear a discipleship formation in you that refreshes me, that gives me optimism instead of looking at technology and getting depressed by the things that are dangerous in it. Thank you for the wisdom that you exercise and help us to also extend wisdom instead of that discouragement. So thank you for the way that you're helping us to ask this question about how technology forms our discipleship. And I hope to have more with you in the days to come. But for now, thank you for joining us today, Michael. What a pleasure, always.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Listener, thank you for joining us today. And there are a few other people that we'd like to thank. Eric Church for getting this podcast out to you wherever you are watching or listening. Micah Pop for his astute sound and video production. Daniel Ramirez for composing our theme music. And to also my co-hosts, Nick O'Brien and Phil Snyder. The vision and direction for the Living Room Disciple podcast comes from these dear team of people who are bringing it to you. Welcome again. Thank you for joining us, the Living Room Disciple, where discipleship finds a home.